I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Poseidon and ASCON and why it's really important that we understand one to understand the other. I've been concerned about the Poseidon plant for 15 years as I've lived in my home for 28. And in the beginning, it had to do with construction pollution and noise. Because it's no small thing to add another polluter into the little toxic triangle we live in. Southeast is home to two working power plants, as you know. A Superfund site, which is behind me, and the OC Sanitation District, which is doing a bang-up job of making reclaimed water. These three major sound, air, and visual polluters surround this neighborhood like a giant, and this giant never sleeps. Pardon me with the wind. In 2019, the site behind me started working on a remediation that literally has been off and on for decades. My excellent health during this time began to noticeably change. In fact, the whole neighborhood became sick. People were complaining of shortness of breath, sinus infections, burning eyes and throats, weird allergies, and asthma attacks, severe asthma attacks. It was back in 2019 of January, ASCON began their final remediation to remove portions of the landfill, and they began right over there in the northwest corner. It didn't take long for their remediation to go very wrong. It was an early morning. I was here at this park on the other side, walking my animals when I smelled it the first time, and it smelled bad. It was a very noxious smell. If you've ever smelled chemicals like crude oil or tar from a rooftop, you would understand. I had a visceral reaction, and I literally ran in my car, went straight to the gate, looked at the number on the fence line, and called it. I didn't get a response right away. I was concerned. You know, this is my hometown, and I went to Edison High School, and the smell was bad, and I wasn't sure. Are we having a chemical emergency? So I ran over to Edison, and I knocked on the door at the front, and I said, guys, you got to call this number. I can't be the only one. Something's wrong. And they looked at me and said, no, that's just a burp from the ocean. You know, those tankers do that. We get those weird smells now and then. I went home. I was flabbergasted, and I thought, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I'm thinking. I'm just going to wait for a call back from ASCON. It's temporary. It can't be that bad, right? I mean, they're allowed to dig, right? It's not bad. Well, the next morning, I woke up serving breakfast to my family, and there was that smell again, except this time it was inside my home. Again, I don't live right next to ASCON on where they were digging, far enough for the wind to take that chemical smell into my home. I was freaking out. I called again, but this time my neighborhood woke up. They smelled it too, and they were worried. People were calling one another, and there was panic in the air. And we finally got an investigator from AQMD to come out and check it out. And that became my new normal. That became my daily occurrence for 6 weeks, along with a lot of this community. And we would call AQMD. We would have to have more than 6 people. They'd come out, they'd do this. They'd say, do you smell it still? It was crazy. And all the while, chemical exposure was being had. This community was being polluted and poisoned. And it took a 6-week effort before we got a nuisance violation from AQMD, and that's when it started. For the first time in the 30 years I lived here, I looked around and I thought, gosh, is it safe to leave my windows open? Is it safe to have my doors open? I should shut my doors. Maybe what we're breathing isn't okay, because, if you look on the fence line, a little bit farther down, there's some banners. Okay, these banners have a list of chemicals. I'm going to read them to you. They're no easy list to live next to. Mercury, lead, nickel, chromium, hexavalent chromium. Think Julia Roberts and Erin Brockovich. That was the chemical she unearthed. Dibenzoanthracene.
That's a big one.
I can't even say the last one. Benzo-H-pyrene. These are a new list that has been updated since the first time 2019's remediation started. So they have actually added chemicals that they're disclosing. And these are really, really important because they're cancer-causing chemicals. Doesn't matter if it's a short-term exposure or a long-term exposure. It's exposure. inspector come down here, he met me and some neighbors right where we're standing. And he looked at the corner where the excavators were lifting these big pieces of slurry, dark, smelly earth and loading them onto front loaders with this white, foamy odor suppressant being sprayed, hitting bicyclists, cars, and people. And it was a mess. And he looked at us and he said, okay, I've seen enough. It was that night at Edison High School where I was in attendance with about 500 of our neighbors. Man, it was right out of a movie. We had the mayor of Costa Mesa's personnel there saying, shut it down. We had a former council member storm in and say, and he's Irish. Okay, I can't do the Irish accent, but he came in and said, cover it up, shut it down. Parents of sick kids who had illnesses that had just, presented themselves in the first 6 weeks, and, it came to a screeching halt that night. That was June 6, 2019, and this thing has been shut down ever since. I have the privilege of being on a city commission, or a city committee, where I am one of the stakeholders, and I get to hear what DTSC is doing in alignment with the responsible parties of this site. It's been almost 3 years, and I can safely tell you as of the last meeting, there is no end in sight. We haven't found a solution on how to finish remediation here. The soil is so dangerous. It cannot be emitted into the air. We have to protect health and human safety, and that's the big problem. That's the problem we have with Poseidon. Because Poseidon would like to build their pipeline right here behind me, on this 2-lane street called Hamilton Avenue. DTSC has given such rigorous oversight and so many things that this responsible party has to endure just to move a piece of concrete. I cannot imagine how opening up Hamilton Avenue, which is a mere 10 feet from the contamination that's been there for decades. This is legacy pollution, as you've heard. And it's a Pandora's box. It's a 38-acre parcel of land that wasn't regulated at one time, that has caused a lot of injury to the community 3 years ago. And to be reckless and open up Hamilton Avenue without knowing what lies underneath, and believe me, they don't know. How do I know that? In Southeast Huntington Beach, we are grateful that we get a meeting every other month to talk about all the stuff that goes on, all the industry and the issues of Southeast at City Hall. And the Vice President, Scott Maloney of Poseidon, visits this meeting, and he is there to give an update. At the last meeting, someone asked him, what will happen if you open up Hamilton Avenue and you have an uncontrolled hazardous materials release? And he looked at us through the Zoom call that it was for him. I was in person. And he said, well, I guess we'll just stop. Guys, we had a chemical emergency literally 3 years ago with unknown contaminants being emitted into the air, causing illness to the point that the 38-acre parcel of Superfund site cannot be touched yet. For him to have that kind of arrogance with my health, and my family's health, hey, that answer shows me that they didn't do their homework, and that's unacceptable. I won't go on and on because I could. But today, our governor was quoted in the LA Times as saying, we are as dumb as we want to be. Well, he's actually spot on. To ignore a Superfund site that's 15 feet from where you want to disrupt land and build a pipeline that's dangerous and could cause exposure to the residents is pretty dumb to me. And also, to quote him today, he mentions, we need more tools in our toolkit. Well, maybe desal is one of them, okay? I'll give him that. But not here. Not in this location. Where 3 years ago, the community was poisoned because they were digging into the ground and they didn't know what was there. It's a mystery. Lastly, he says 7 out of 10 years we've been in severe drought. Well, we're not here to debate that. know we're in a drought. We're debating whether the location of this project and its dangerous consequences, what they're going to do to this community that people live in, I live in, you live in. It's wrong. The location is wrong, and the risk far outweighs the gains. So, when he states in his last comment that I'll quote him on is, he says, I perused the report. Well, to say that, I read the report, sir. I would strongly encourage you to not peruse it, but to read it. Because our community is counting on you, Governor Newsom, if you're watching, you know, to protect residents who live here from consequences that are unknown and have not been proven to be safe. You know, he said the report was really long. He said it was really long. You know why it's long? Because there's a long list of reasons why we shouldn't do it. So I'm going to be May 12th with my neighbors and my family at the Costa Mesa Hilton. And anybody watching, I would encourage you to join us. It's not the right place. Please say no to Poseidon.
Yeah!